A great delight now to introduce Alison Hitchcock, who works with us here at the Word Factory. Alison's just completed her MA at Birkbeck, and I've had the privilege of reading the novel that she is writing on, which is the story of a career woman who takes on board her teenage nephew. Her short stories have appeared in the Mechanics Institute Review, and also she won was shortlisted in the first SASH Short Story Prize and published in an anthology called Homeless. So, ladies and gentlemen, Alison Hitchcock.
Thank you. Hello. Rather greedily, I'm going to read two things. I know, it is Christmas though. So the first thing I'm going to read is just the beginning of a short story which Cathy referred to that was published in the Mechanics Institute Review, and then I have a very short story to finish with. So this is called One Up. One across, 4 letters. We can neither slow it down nor speed it up, or can we? Ken tipped the point of his biro onto his tongue, hovered it over one across, and then stopped. Can't speed it up or slow it down, or can we? The words ran through his mind, but the answer didn't come. Mary would have known. She'd have got it before Ken had even finished reading out the clue. Love a crossword but never have one, that's right, isn't it? She'd say, and then be on to the next clue. Let's get a move on. Just because you're retired doesn't mean we have to go in slow motion. I've housework to get on with. One across still didn't come to Ken. He tried one down. One down, 7 letters. You do the sums. It's not 1 or 3. Got that one, Mary, got that one, he said into the empty room. Twosome. Now we're getting somewhere. He nodded towards the empty chair by his side. She'd be sipping her tea now, telling him to drink up. Too hot for me yet, he'd reply. She'd have finished before he'd even started. Asbestos lips, he called her. Ken missed their comfortable morning routine. Up at 8, her going downstairs to make the breakfast, always a pot of tea and a slice of toast, while he walked into each room to draw back the curtains, the newspaper always waiting for him on the doormat. After breakfast, showered, shaved and dressed, Ken would sit in the living room with the newspaper while Mary busied herself in the house. Feet up, she'd say over the noise of the vacuum as he ran into the room. What are the headlines? When Ken told her about an impending strike or a new threat of war in a country that neither of them had ever heard of, she'd ask, Who'd want to be Prime Minister? And shake her head. This would make Ken smile. Mary had given up work when they got married. He sometimes wondered whether he should have encouraged her to go back, especially after Tony had gone to university, but she always seemed so busy at home. By mid-morning, Mary would have peeled potatoes for lunch, given the kitchen floor a good scrub, and washed bedding and hung it out on the line. They had lived in the same house since they were married. Don't mend what's not broken, Ken heard her say to Tony on the phone when he occasionally called to see how they were. Me and your dad don't need a bungalow, we're fine here, and anyway, you might want it one day. Ken would smile. Tony was never coming back to live their way. 4 across, 6 letters. Is it mind, clothes, or money? Ken repeated the clue out loud. That one wasn't coming to him either. Do one of the ones across from twosome, Mary's voice. At least you've got the first letter. 6 across, 4 letters. There's only one singer in the choir today. Oh, that's easy, said Ken, chuckling. He wrote in solo. Mary had a lovely voice and had once been in the church choir, but she'd stopped going. She said she was happiest just singing as she pottered around the house, and that God didn't need her to be in church to hear her singing his praises. She'd have enjoyed the hymns at her funeral. He'd picked out her favourites, although they could have done with a few more voices to do them real justice. By 11, Mary would be ready for a sit down, and she'd bring Ken a cup of tea and a biscuit, keep us going till lunch. That's when they'd start the crossword, but Mary could never sit for long before there was another job to do in the house, and she'd be up and off again. "Devils and hands," she'd say as she disappeared into the kitchen. Since she'd gone, Ken had stuck with the same routine. Up at 8, breakfast, bathroom, peel the potatoes for lunch, go round with the hoover, a quick dust if anything looked like it needed it, and then start the crossword. He'd look up at the clock. Only 9:30. So this Friday morning, Ken was pleased when he heard the doorbell chiming. He wasn't used to visitors. Since the initial stream of neighbours with warm dinners and homemade cakes in the month after the funeral, the doorbell hadn't been much used. "Probably the postman with something for next door," he said out loud. He'd noticed he said a lot of things out loud, but he didn't try to stop himself because it was as if Mary was still there to hear him. "First sign of going mad." He smiled as he carefully put the folded paper and pen onto the coffee table, took off his reading glasses and went into the hallway. On the other side of the open door, a young man in a grey, shiny suit thrust his ID card towards Ken. The man grinned widely, letting the card fall back to his chest as he stretched out his arm. "John Phones," said the man, giving Ken's veined and mottled hand a thorough shake. "From Insulation Verma Limited. Can I come in? I'd like to talk to you about the heat you're losing from your roof. We're government contracted." "I didn't know I was losing heat." Ken looked up, squinting into the rising sun. "I know." The man shook his head. "All this street's the same. You may as well be throwing money into the sky. That's why the government's doing something about it." He pointed to his ID card, but as Ken had taken off his reading glasses, the words were a bit of a blur. "You better come in." Ken stepped aside to let the man pass. "Would you like a cup of tea?" And then the second story I'm going to read has two titles. The first title is Sinner's Note, and the second title is What Would Mrs. Fry Have Said? And if you can work out who Mrs. Fry is by the end of the story, you get extra mulled wine downstairs and a mince pie. Gloria gluttonously eyes the last unsold cream cake. Her palms are sweating, her chubby fingers twitching. "Can I tempt you?" the vicar asks, knowing that Gloria will part easily with her money, her mouth now salivating at the Victoria sponge, lovingly baked for the fete that morning by the vicar's wife. "Only £5. Gloria licks her lips, foraging in her bag for her purse. A £5 note passes to the vicar, and the cake passes to Gloria. The vicar squeezes the £5 note into his trouser pocket. The same trousers he is wearing later, when dog collar removed, he rings the bell of 42 Lovers Lane. Petra peeps around the door, dangles a diamond-encrusted dog's collar in front of the vicar and tells him to bark. He follows her upstairs, on all fours, lustily licking her stockinged calves. When he slips away an hour later, the £5 note sits on top of the pile of cash he has left on Petra's bedside table. Petra, notes nestled in cleavage, lights a cigarette and walks into her kitchen, ignoring the piles of grease-stained crockery and crumbs of food on the floor. As a sloth, she slumps onto the threadbare sofa, flicks her ash onto the carpet and blows out a long, seductive line of smoke into the dust of the room. She plucks the £5 note from her bra and places it on the draining board with a note saying, "Give you the rest next week," before retrieving her knitting from the back of the sofa, white booties for a baby still not conceived. £5 is all 50-year-old Jean will get this week for cleaning Petra's rented one-bedroom flat. As Jean wipes away the dirt, she greedily imagines how many more notes are begot on Petra's bed. As she scrubs and scours, she wishes a different life. Schoolmistress spanking the bottoms of men in nappies. When one of the men has the face of her husband, she scrubs harder and the image is purged. Jean cycles home via Pot Alley. Darren loiters on the corner. She hands over the £5 note and he hands over her daily fix. She cycles away, temporarily sated, off to earn more money from cleaning. Darren, scratching behind his ear, shoves the £5 note into his hoodie pocket. The black cat he passes every day, in front of the neat houses with the shuttered windows, slithers its body against his leg. He crooks his hand to fondle its ears, exposing the word kitten tattooed across his knuckles. He enviously eyes the house and then sweeps up the cat, shoving it under his coat. He takes a £5 note and fixes it in the neck of an empty milk bottle sitting on the doorstep. As he steals away, cooing to the cat, now his cat, the cat he will warm milk and chop fish for, he looks away as he passes Mr. Collins, returning home early from a day in the city. Darren hugs the warm cat closer to his body and whispers, "I love you and only you." Mr. Collins knows that Mrs. Collins will still be at work as he opens his front door to the screeching meows of 6 carpet-pissing, attention-grabbing kittens. He sneezes. With a wrath that would shock gentle Mrs. Collins, as she relaxes of an evening with 6 kittens and 1 black mother cat on her lap, Mr. Collins kicks at the kittens before tempting them into a sack with a piece of fish. As he leaves the house, he wonders at the rolled-up £5 note in the bottle. He grabs it, clenching it into his fist. On his way back from the canal, burdened now only by guilt, Mr. Collins calls in at the fishmonger's and with the £5 note buys a piece of haddock for his wife's tea, which will fill the gap on her empty lap. Gloria wishes him a good evening and shuts the shop door, turning the sign to closed. She is already cashed up, so stashes the £5 note into her coat pocket. It is the same coat she is wearing as she sits in the pew on Sunday, listening to the vicar warn of the sins of everyday life. The collection plate is passed along. She fingers the £5 and with great pride donates it to the church. She glances around to see who has observed her generous gesture. Perhaps allergy-free Mr. Collins, Jean, wife of school headmaster, or Petra and Darren, the newlyweds, or maybe the dog-collared vicar himself. "Let us pray for forgiveness," hails the vicar. The congregation bow their heads.
Fantastic, thank you.